Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
How to survive holidays. How to survive college. Strange rule of the university. A long horror story from Reddit Nosleep. Hi there. My name is Ashley, and I was voted most likely to get killed in my senior yearbook. If you're thinking, wow, that's a pretty dark joke, yes, it is. But there's a little bit of truth in it too. You see, I used to work at a campground that I think some of you know pretty well. It was a decent job. Kate always kept the minors and her employment in the safe jobs. I worked in the camp store as a cashier, and the worst I had to deal with was money that had been pulled out of someone's bra. Please don't do that. Carry a wallet, I'm begging you. No one wants to touch your boob sweat. Around here our lives are pretty much lined up for us before we get out of high school. Not many people leave, so it's expected that you have yourself figured out before you graduate. For me, it looked pretty likely that I'd just keep working at the campground. I was reliable, so Kate kept hiring me year after year as seasonal help, and generally, when you've spent all of high school working at the campground, you've got a good shot at getting a permanent spot when they open up. Hence the yearbook entry. It's not that I'm bad at following rules or anything. It's just that I don't like dealing with the inhuman, and I'm not particularly good at handling stressful situations. I cry easily.
I'm indecisive.
Sometimes I feel like I was everything Kate wasn't. It's weird, you know. What happened? I don't know whether I should refer to her in past tense or not. But this isn't about Kate. To be honest, I didn't even know her that well. She was my boss, sure, but she wasn't really close to anyone. I can't really tell you anything you don't already know. I actually learned a lot about her when I read over all those posts she made. Yeah, I found them, obviously. No one else around town has thought, because the rumors would be everywhere if someone had. And I'm not about to say anything. It's nice, though, to have a group of people that already know all about the campground. I feel like I can come here and write this out and have people that understand my situation. Much like Kate, my future was laid out in large part by my family. Unlike Kate, it wasn't the future I wanted. I'm the second oldest in a family of 6. My mom runs an antique store. It's actually just a junk store, but a lot of the campers that venture into town can't tell the difference between vintage, antique, and badly maintained. I don't think I grew up poor, but I certainly wouldn't call my family financially stable. Same situation as most of the folks around here. I didn't see much of my dad growing up. He was usually out west working in the fields. He sent money home regularly, until one day he didn't. We never found out what happened to him. Everyone around town said that he'd gotten tired of mom cheating on him and split, but I don't think the affair was enough to make him abandon his children as well. I think something got him. Something out in the fields. And the people that hired him, well, they've got their own secrets they want to keep, much like Kate did. After he vanished, Mom grew genuinely concerned about making sure all her children would turn out okay, but it was like she could only care about one of us at a time. I grew up without much of her attention, and honestly, I think I wouldn't have turned out that well if it weren't for the campground. The staff looked out for the high schoolers. Ed gave me my first beer when I was 15. Brian helped get my car towed out of the ditch one winter when I slid off the road. They were like a second family. Then last year my older sister got married, and all of a sudden Mom cared very deeply about what would happen to me after I graduated. Fortunately for her, there was a script already written. I was dating someone. His dad ran an auto repair shop, and he was all set to work there, and probably inherited it after he got done with school. It's a pretty stable business, and in my mom's mind, which would set me up for life. All I had to do was marry him, and that'd be one less child she had to worry about. He wouldn't go out west and get killed by whatever else is out there, lurking in the branches of the orchards or in the shadows of the barns. And I just accepted this. I graduated in the spring and worked at the campground for the summer, and as fall approached, my older sister started talking about weddings and whether my boyfriend would propose or not. Like that was the only future I had. When I look back, I wonder why I sent out those college applications. No one had talked to me about college. Not my teachers, not my parents, no one. College was something the well-off families like Kate's did, and there aren't many of those. I just went to the library one day, printed out some applications, authored an essay, and sent them in. It felt like I was someone else at that moment, acting on a crazy whim. I guess maybe I knew, even if I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. I didn't love my boyfriend. I was just going through the motions. Dating him was something I felt was expected of me.
He wasn't even all that nice.
Now I can write about it in the past tense. A week ago, I got a response from one of those colleges. It's an obscure state college, but they're giving me an academic scholarship that'll cover tuition, housing, and even a stipend for food. Since I applied too late for the fall semester, I'll be able to start after winter break. It was like my world was turned upside down when I opened that letter. I panicked. I couldn't let anyone in my family see it. They'd all bought into the fantasy that my life would turn out just like my sister's, that I'd marry my high school sweetheart, and everything would be perfect. Like a fairy tale. And here I was, holding the key to my own prison cell, and I couldn't let them know that I had it. With 4 siblings left in the house, I didn't exactly have a lot of privacy, especially during the Christmas season. So I left, took the car, and went to the only place I felt comfortable, the campground. Despite what the yearbook says, I felt safer there than I did in my own home. I took the letter with me so I could read it over and over, in the solitude of the deep woods where no one could bother me. That was the plan, at least. Then everyone's favorite thirst trap showed up. Just sauntered up the path and stopped in front of where I sat on a boulder. I got to say, I appreciate that Kate's version of him was hot. Would you like a drink? Bo asked, holding out the skull cup. I stared blankly at him for a moment. This wasn't my first time seeing him after the rules changed. He could have offered it to me at any time, so why now? You're at a crossroad, he said in answer to my unspoken question. It's time to finally decide. Oh, sure. We've all talked about it. How we would answer Bo when he asked. And I just never decided because he doesn't ask the locals, so what did it matter? But here he was offering. I can't, I stammered. Can't drink? Or something else. His gaze slid down to the letter. I clutched it close to my chest and pressed my lips firmly together. He retracted the cup and crouched across from me so that we were on eye level. I found the Reddit posts, I said, when I was searching for university applications. I'm not going to tell Tyler, or anyone else for that matter, anything about what Kate wrote.
Wise.
I doubt the fairies would be pleased with you for making them come erase Tyler's memory. I want to believe he's got a sense of humor, so I'm just assuming that was a joke. I'm not sure what I want to do, I said glumly. Mom wants me to stay here and marry my boyfriend. You realize that you're seeking advice from a creature that literally cannot choose his own name, much less what he wants to be. You sought me out. He inclined his head slightly, and I thought it was conceding the point, but there was a faintly mocking smile on his lips as he did. Perhaps he didn't seek me out. Perhaps I called him, just as Kate used to. This wouldn't be a difficult decision if you'd already decided to stay, he said, rising to his feet. Staying with what you know is always the easier choice. There is comfort in familiarity. He hit me, I whispered. My boyfriend. I haven't told anyone else yet. Pain can be familiar. He turned to leave. I glanced up at him in surprise. I still haven't decided if I want to drink or not, I said. It wasn't a serious offer. You belong to something else tonight. Startled, I looked around me. There was nothing in eyeshot, but why was Bo backing away while keeping his gaze expectantly on me? Hadn't Kate handled all the dangerous things? I stumbled to my feet, heart pounding loud enough that I could hear it. Then I realized it wasn't my heartbeat I was hearing. It was hooves. This was Christmas time. I turned around to stare at the source of the approaching noise in dismay, rooted in terror as a group of armored riders mounted on horseback came crashing through the woods, bearing down on where I stood. The shuriken. Here to drown someone that definitely wasn't feeling the Christmas spirit right now. I thought of the yearbook. How I got that title not because I was in any more danger than the rest of them, but because I'm incompetent. And I'm ashamed to say that I stood there, paralyzed by fear, helpless to do even the simplest of things. I didn't even try to run. The lead rider closed on me. He leaned over in his saddle, stretching out one hand. I flinched, and then the ground was spinning out from under me. I felt a moment of weightlessness, and it was like every muscle in my body froze, and then I landed on my stomach across the horse's back. It knocked the wind out of me, and it was like my chest froze up. I clutched uselessly at the horse's thin hair, panicking as the ground rushed past my face at a dizzying speed, carried along by the horse's hooves flashing at the corner of my vision. The shuriken had thrown me bodily across the front of his saddle, and Bo just waved goodbye at me as he quickly receded out of sight. This one doesn't care much for Christmas. The lead rider hollered back at his company as they rode through the forest. And what do we do with those that don't keep the spirit of the season? Drown them, the rest yelled in response. But I'm on the campground, I wailed. Tyler bought the lake, the rider replied smugly. Signed the paperwork yesterday. I'm a little salty at Tyler for that.
I'm sorry.
I sobbed. There's a lot going on right now. Can't I get a second chance? Show us your devotion, one of the shuriken cried. A song, another added. A song. It took a moment to catch on to what they were demanding. I got good grades, but I don't feel like I'm particularly clever, and I'm certainly not very brave. But desperation can do funny things to a person. Gives them resolve they didn't know they had. I cannot tell you how hard it is to sing Jingle Bells while slung across a horse running at a full gallop while also sobbing uncontrollably, but I somehow got it out. And then the rider grabbed hold of my jacket once more and heaved me off. I landed headfirst in a snowdrift. I was stuck up to my waist, and I kicked helplessly, thrashing in blind panic as the hoofbeats receded. Maybe they wouldn't drown me, but I'd suffocate if I didn't get out of the snow. The cold worked its way into my skin, and the air grew stale in my lungs. I opened my mouth to gasp and found only snow, filling my mouth, and I desperately choked on it. The letter was still clutched tight in my frozen fingers. College. A way out. I convulsed, twisting my body together and digging my knees into the snow. The spastic, desperate motion broke off a chunk of the wet snow and sent it sliding down the snowbank. The rest of me broke free shortly after, and I slid down it to rest at the base, gasping for air. More snow broke free, gently rolling down to half cover my chest, but I didn't care.
Idę surviva.
I was alive. The chilly air was sweet as it burned in my lungs. I think being half buried in snow was what saved me. The shuriken weren't the only things out hunting that day. I felt it first as a feeling of dread in my chest. A squeezing sensation. The light was suddenly painful in my eyes, like the waning sunlight reflected all the more brightly off the snow and ice. It was sharp, like the light was crystallizing, stabbing into my flesh. My breath came out in a thick cloud, and my tears froze on my cheeks. Footsteps. Heavy, even footsteps. I turned my head to the side, not daring to move any more than that. A massive figure was slowly trudging through the woods, shoulders hunched, and head bowed. Its matted fur was the color of the tree bark and curving horns protruded from its deformed skull. It glittered with frost, silver dusted on the tips of its horns and the ends of its fur. Its hooves left deep imprints in the snow that crackled with ice as the snow melted and immediately refroze in its wake. I shifted, burrowing deeper into the snow. My leg dislodged more of the snowbank, and it tumbled down over me, enveloping my body and covering my face and head so that I could barely see through a thin layer of white powder. The footsteps paused. The snow creaked as it shifted. It turned and walked in my direction. I sucked in one last deep breath and held it. I didn't dare exhale. I didn't dare do anything that could possibly alert it to my presence, hidden beneath the snow. Paralyzed with fear, I watched as its hooves stomped closer. I could smell sulfur, and the snow steamed at its feet. It stood over me, an immense, foul presence that I could feel on my skin, like insects crawling down the back of my jacket, running across my spine. My lungs burned, thirsting for air, but I grimly held on. I embraced my terror, letting it paralyze my limbs. The creature stood there for a long, agonizing moment. Then, ponderously, it turned away. The smell of moss and rot went with it. A chain trailed behind it. It was clutched in one hand, taut against the weight it dragged behind it. I finally took a breath, shallow, shaking, as the rattle of the chain covered any noise I might make. I watched as the chain bounced past me until it ended, wrapped tight around the neck of the body it was dragging behind it. My boyfriend. His body was frozen solid with his hands clutching at the chain wrapped around and around his neck. His eyes were open, bulging like glass marbles, and his tongue stuck out from between his frosted lips. His legs dragged behind him like a doll, leaving shallow furrows in the snow as he slid past me. Krampus had come to take all the wicked boys and girls away. I remained hidden under the snow as he continued on his slow journey through the forest, dragging my boyfriend behind him like a sled. I didn't work up the courage to move until long after he'd gone. Only once I was convinced I was entirely alone did I finally crawl out of the snow, shaking violently, and stumbled back through the woods to find a familiar path before the sun set entirely. Tyler found me at the edge of the forest. He saw my car in the parking lot and went searching for whoever was still on the campground. He's a nice person. His wife made me hot chocolate while I warmed up inside their house, shaking violently as my hands and feet thawed. Then, he let me use his computer to fill out the university's acceptance form and register for my first semester of classes. I haven't told my family yet. In fact, I haven't told anyone in town. I might not tell anyone until the day I leave. I'm telling you though, because I feel like I can. I'm going to leave all this behind me. I'm not Kate. I'm not stuck here because of my family or any other obligation. I'm not going to die for something inhuman, like my yearbook entry says. I'm going to college instead.
2.
Leaving home was pretty rough on its own, to say nothing of the grief my family put me through. I told them that I was going to college a couple of weeks in advance of the move-in date. I sort of had to. My boyfriend's disappearance had thrown my mother into a frenzy. I didn't tell anyone what I saw in the woods. I told Tyler about the shuriken, but not about Krampus. He thinks it'll be fine in the end. The campground isn't open during the Christmas season, after all, because no one wants to camp in the snow. He's only got his staff to worry about, and he doesn't think the shuriken will actually be drowning anyone. They didn't carry through with their threat, after all. They might have free run of the campground now, but that puts them under the jurisdiction of the lady, and Kate had enough bad run-ins with a shuriken while she was human that he doesn't think she'll let them get away with much. He doesn't think anything that the lake could attract could get away with much. There's an ancient in charge of the campground now, after all. I hope he's right. Lakes are dangerous, and Kate probably isn't going to be happy to have to deal with that. She really can't catch a break, can she, either as a human or as an ancient? But that's not my problem. No, my problem was my family being weird to me. I blurted it out one evening when Mom was in a frenzy about what I was going to do about my future if my ex-boyfriend didn't come back. So, I was like, hey, I do have a plan, I'm going to college, you don't need to keep freaking out about me. Goof, big mistake. My mom was upset, but she was worried, and that's not quite the same as being mean.
It still sucked to deal with.
I was already nervous enough about uprooting my whole life, and having to reassure my mom on top of it, instead of the other way around, was kind of a lot. I suppose she's afraid I'll go away and not come back like Dad did, and that's traumatizing, but I lost my dad. It's not like I don't have my own issues about that. It's not like I'm not scared to leave. So yes, we were both upset and stressed, and naturally that led to some fights. I feel I could have handled it if that were all, though. But then my older sister decided to get involved. She still comes around the house a bit, usually when she's bored at home by herself while her husband is at work. She was convinced that my boyfriend's sudden disappearance was my fault. Like I'd driven him off or something by being too clingy or not clingy enough. I wasn't helping at Mom's junk store because I wasn't getting along with her and the campground was closed for the season, so that meant I was home a lot, watching over the younger siblings during winter break. And unfortunately, that meant I was around my older sister far more than I'd like. It was just this constant nagging at me. Where did I think he went? What was the last thing I said to him? Was I trying to pressure him into marriage? Boys don't like to be pressured. And then I said he's not a boy, he's a man, we're both 18 and talking back was clearly the wrong thing to do. Honestly, I think she's unhappy in her own marriage and is either projecting or is trying to force me into the same miserable choices she made so she has company. Joke's on her, my ex-boyfriend is dead. My younger siblings tend to parrot whatever she does as well, so it's been weeks of nothing but pick on Ashley. And when I finally shut down and stopped responding, it turned into, oh well, now Ashley is too good for us because she's leaving. I think I understand why Kate didn't get along with her extended family. This town sucks sometimes. Anyway, by the time move-in weekend rolled around, it had gotten so bad that I didn't even have a ride to school. I'd figured out how to apply to school on my own, so I could figure out how to get there myself as well. And my older sister told me that I didn't deserve her help because I wasn't properly grateful for the things I had here. Which, for the record, was a boyfriend that hit me. Obviously, I don't have a car. I called Tyler in tears. And his wife, who is an absolute saint, volunteered to take me. And then she shows up to pick me up, and when I go to put my bags in the trunk, I find there's a care package assembled by the campground staff. Like there was food, shower sandals, which I didn't even know was a thing you needed, a bathrobe, a cute throw pillow that someone made, an electric kettle, microwave popcorn, and even a bottle of moonshine. Yes, I am underage, and yes, that is 100% not allowed in the dorms. Sometimes this town sucks, and sometimes it's the best place full of the best people. Move-in was pretty crazy. Everyone was coming back from winter break, and while it wasn't as bad as fall semester move-in, according to Tyler's wife, there were still a lot of cars and a lot of people. Tyler's wife helped with the whole thing. I sort of just followed her lead the whole time. She checked in at the dorm front desk for me and got my dorm assignment and helped me bring my stuff upstairs. My roommate had moved in during the fall semester, and her things were already neatly distributed in the room. There were 2 loft beds, and she had a futon, a mini fridge, and a microwave positioned underneath them. Tyler's wife helped me put my things away and pretended not to see me stashing the moonshine in my underwear drawer. Then she went with me to meet with my advisor and didn't bother to correct anyone when they called her my mom.
See?
She's a saint. I don't know what I would have done without her. Been stuck in that crummy town, sitting in the deep woods sobbing on Beau's shoulder, I suppose. I haven't picked a major yet. I honestly have no idea what I want to do. My first semester is crammed full of general electives instead. I did abysmally on my math placement exam, and I've got at least 2 semesters worth of catch-up before I'm on par with the students coming from fancy high schools with AP classes. Then Tyler's wife insisted we take a self-guided tour of campus so that I'd know where my classes were. The student orientation for the spring semester newcomers was the next day, but Tyler's wife doubted it'd cover much more than where a couple key buildings were. I was completely overwhelmed by that point, so I thought that yes, a walk around campus would be nice. It's nothing like home. I noticed that on the drive over. The soft hills and forests gave way to flat plains covered with fields of corn and soybeans. I've never seen so much sky at once in my life. I felt incredibly small, like the sky was a vast and ancient god staring down at the little ants scurrying far below. At least the campus had buildings and trees to break the oppressive monotony, though they did nothing to relieve the wind. If anything, they condensed it, so that it came roaring between the buildings like an oncoming train. It was bitterly cold, and it wasn't long before I could feel my nose. I forgot about the cold when we reached the northern part of campus. Instead of a lovely green stretch with trees and landscaping or more buildings, there was a cemetery. An actual cemetery with headstones and faded fake flowers and an iron fence encasing it. This is different, Tyler's wife finally said. I guess the university just built up around it over time. I'm not sure I want to go here anymore, I said. Not every place is like the campground. My university was perfectly normal. No one died while I was there. That you knew of, I replied pointedly. She didn't have a response to that. Still, she said cheerfully, just because there's a graveyard here doesn't mean there's anything unnatural going on. This might not be on old land. The wind picked up, rattling the branches and shaking the artificial flowers decorating the headstones. Sure, I said, unconvinced. How about I just stay away from this part of campus after dark? Yeah, that'd probably be smart. Excuse me, a voice said from behind us. Are you new here? We both turned. A short young man stood behind us, smirking with obvious glee at our consternation at finding a cemetery in the middle of campus. Yeah, I said. This is my move-in day. So, you haven't had orientation yet? Well, they'll tell you about it tomorrow. It's not that exciting, though. The campus just sort of swallowed this area up, and they didn't want to move all the bodies somewhere else. Sometimes they'll be holding a burial while you're walking to class. That's always awkward. So, it's actively being used still? Tyler's wife asked. It was the student who explained. It wasn't anywhere near full, and the campus only bordered 3 sides of a cemetery anyway, and so it'd likely be in use for years to come as they could always expand. The student medical center was on one end and the math department on the other, so there were a lot of jokes about that, but otherwise it wasn't that big of a deal. Now, the rain, on the other hand—
Pardon?
I asked in that polite way that still left no room for doubt that I would have an explanation. The student glanced thoughtfully at the sky. It had been overcast all day, but I hadn't bothered to check the forecast to see if it was going to storm or not. They'll tell you about it at orientation, he said reluctantly, but I suppose I should go ahead and spoil some of the fun. Just in case it rains tonight. It's 20 degrees out, Tyler's wife said. Yeah, we're going to get a warm snap. It'll jump above freezing in a few hours. It's just something that happens around here. Which is weird, right? Like, I think that's weird. But I don't know. Maybe it is normal for this area. I am going to an out-of-state college after all. I don't really know what things are like around here. There's only one thing you need to know about this university, he continued. No one goes outside when it rains. For any reason whatsoever. That can't be true, I said flatly. How do you attend classes if you don't go outside when it's raining? Professors will cancel class. Well, most of them will. Ask your dorm floor for an invite to the university Discord. We'll get you a list of the ones that don't. And what happens to those that do go out in the rain? Oh, you'll hear the stories. There's lots of them. He winked at me and then walked away. Tyler's wife and I watched him go in dismay. Or at least I was dismayed. Tyler's wife continued to try and find the positive aspect. She was really working to make my first day on campus special. Schools always have these silly legends, she said cheerfully. My school believed that if you didn't kiss the toe of the founder's statue on the way to your final exams, you'd fail. Gross. And yet the statue's toe was still shiny and polished. I wish that were it. I really do. I wish I'd gone back to my dorm room and met my roommate, and nothing else happened. My roommate, at least I'm used to sharing a small space with other people. I grew up in a big family, after all. Otherwise, I'm not sure how I'd do this whole sharing a small space with a total stranger thing. Not that there's anything wrong with Cassie.
She's all right.
Comes from some white picket fence kind of suburb with good schools and parents that are helping pay for her tuition. I mean, she's not rich if that's what you're thinking, middle class, or, at least, what the middle class is supposed to be. This is not a prestigious private school, after all. It's an obscure state college and she's in state, unlike me. It's a practical choice. I think we're both a lot alike in that regard. Maybe we come from wildly diverse backgrounds, but we both made sensible choices. I think we'll get along. She'd been here since the start of the fall semester. Her former roommate dropped out or something. Cassie wasn't sure since she'd never told her the reason. Just left during finals week, and when she got back from her classes, her roommate's side of the room was cleared out, and she hadn't heard from her since. They weren't really friends, Cassie said, so she wasn't particularly bothered by it. It happened. Yes, I texted Tyler's wife and asked her if it really was something that happened at college, and she texted me back that yes it was, and to stop assuming the rest of the world was like the campground. But in my defense, the rest of the world is like the campground. Maybe. If you're unlucky. Or live on old land. Cassie got me hooked up with the campus Discord invite. There are channels for each dorm and dorm floor, which is kind of cool. I don't know if it's normal for a university students to be this organized, and Discord wasn't around when Tyler's wife went to school, so she can't really tell me. I'm pretty glad they are, though, because when I joined I was greeted with a pinned announcement in the general channel. Cassie had already gone to bed. I was too excited to sleep yet, so I was still up even though it was well past midnight. The computer screen was the only light in our dorm room as I stared at the message. It's supposed to rain tonight, it said. No one go outside. And as I finished reading it, the clouds broke and the rain slammed into the window of our dorm. It sounded like the impact of a fist, and I jumped in my chair. In her loft bed, Cassie woke with a start. She stared at the window, her back to me, her hair a wispy mass floating across her shoulders. Ashley, she whispered. Yeah, don't go outside, okay? She lay back down and pulled the covers up over her head. Her voice was muffled by the blanket. I stared out the window. Campus is a lot brighter than I'm used to. There aren't many streetlights where I'm from. Just a couple on Main Street and some on the campground. They're everywhere in the university, though. Stately arches, aesthetically pleasing, lighting each and every walkway. Their warm glow made the rain shimmer like it was cut from glass. The wind transformed the rain into sheets, and it was like a glittering mirage, distorting the world outside my window. I didn't like it. It made me uneasy. Then I saw something approaching. A human figure running. I squinted, trying to make it out in the hazy mix of light and darkness. A woman. She was sprinting for the side entrance to the dormitory, running with panicked abandon. She wasn't trying to shield herself from the rain. She wasn't tucked over to protect her purse or her phone somewhere on her body. She looked desperate. "Cassie," I hissed. "Someone is out there. Go to bed, Ashley." I glanced over at my roommate's loft. She'd pulled her blankets up over her head. Then I looked back outside. The woman was at the door, frantically swiping her key card. It took her 2 tries before the panel turned green, and she was able to yank the door open. I watched until it fell shut behind her, and she was out of sight, safely inside the building. And something knocked on the door behind her, hard enough that it shook in its frame. I saw the impact as a splatter of raindrops, like someone had thrown a water balloon, and it exploded on impact. I stared intently at the rain and the darkness. My heart was pounding in my chest. I wanted to say I was just being silly, but I knew better than to dismiss what I saw. So I stared, searching for whatever had knocked on the door, and then it hit the window of my dorm room. A single blow with a crack like a rock hitting the glass. I stumbled backwards with a sharp gasp of surprise, my chest seizing up in sudden panic. Nothing else happened. Like whatever was out there saw me looking for it, and decided to warn me off. "Cassie," I gasped, my voice a frightened croak. What was that? But Cassie stubbornly refused to answer this time. I nervously glanced out the window one more time, but nothing else happened. Just the rain hitting the pavement in sheets with each gust of the wind. Finally, reluctantly, I gathered up my bathroom caddy to go brush my teeth. It really was getting late, and I needed to sleep at some point. Besides, my hands were shaking, and I needed some sort of routine to calm my nerves, or I'd never get to sleep. I heard her, the woman fleeing the rain, on my way to the bathroom. She's someone on my floor. I heard her sobbing inside her dorm room. Our rooms are decently insulated, but I think she was right up against the door. I paused to listen in. I felt a little bit guilty, but I needed to know. It's okay, another voice was saying. Her roommate. You're back. Nothing happened. It happened so fast, she gasped. The sky just opened up. I know. And my boyfriend. He says someone on his floor heard the scratching. It's only our first day back dash. Their voices dwindled as they moved further into the dorm room. I hurried on before anyone caught me eavesdropping. Cassie, I asked once I was back in the room. She grunted to indicate she was still awake. What happens if I go outside? Nothing, she said. Nothing at all. I wish I could believe her. But considering how I grew up and listening to the rain slam against the window like it was trying to find a way in, I can't just ignore what I saw. Especially since I saw one last thing after I had climbed into my loft. I looked out the window one more time, and from that angle, I could see something in the door that I hadn't been able to see before. Something that wasn't there when I'd used that door earlier in the day. A crack. A crack across the entire length of the glass pane. The orientation went great.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.